People who live in dorms, what is your craziest dorm story? Story 1. MU back in the mid-80s. Some guy taped, caulked, and screwed the gang shower door shut, trying to make a swimming aquarium of sorts. They filled it with about 5 feet of water, and 5 or 6 guys climbed in and started swimming when the stall glass broke away from the walls and a couple thousand gallons of water flooded the entire dorm floor. Story 2. Not me, but my sister last year had a hectic and sad one. She lived last year in a dorm with another girl in the same room. Girl seemed fine. They got along great and were pretty good roommates. Around first semester exam time, she walks into her dorm to find her roommate dead on her bed. The roommate committed suicide and said in a letter to her, "This is not your fault, I just can't handle school anymore." Sister was traumatized but continued with school. Different room now and new roommate, same dorm style. Only 2 weeks after, she finds her new roommate with a knife in her stomach on the floor. This roommate was stabbed by the roommate's boyfriend who couldn't handle a breakup from her roommate. Luckily, she survived. So my sister decides that these types of rooms are not for her and asks to have a single. Receives a single room and my sister can finally relax. But wait, there's more. Nearing the end of her second semester around exam time, the guy who was living in the room across from her hung himself in the middle of the hallway, right in front of his and my sister's door. Needless to say, my sister received complete compensation, meaning she got all of her dorm living money back for her horrible dorm living experience in first year, and now lives off residence by herself. Story 3. My roommate decided that he didn't want to go to college anymore and thus just stopped going to class. He went out drinking every night until he blacked out and then would come back to the dorm room and challenge me to some stupid fight. One night, he punched me in the face because I was watching TV and he wanted to watch a different channel. I didn't say anything because I was 17. It was my first month of college and I wanted to prove I was a man who didn't need help. I basically lived like an abuse victim for 2 months. I would cringe when he got home, wondering what would set him off and why he'd try to fight me today. In October, he called his parents and told them that he was dropping out, and they told him no, and said that he would need to finish the semester. He responded by smashing literally everything he owned into bits. Cell phone thrown against the wall, Guitar Hero controllers smashed repeatedly into the ground, punched a hole into the TV, drop-kicked his printer/scanner, total freakout. Then he realized what he'd done and started chugging laundry detergent and whatever pills he could find to try to kill himself. I ran and got the RA at this point, and they called the police. He was taken away and kept for a psych eval. Crappiest 18th birthday ever. On the plus side, his parents came to pick him up and he left college immediately. I stole one of his pillows as a sort of FU, and I sleep with that pillow firmly planted against my grundle every single night. Screw you, Craig. Story 4. Couple of hippie friends moved in together. Day 1, they had a plan for the coolest party room. They put up their beds as bunk beds. They put their desks and chairs in the study room. Then they covered the floor with blankets and more blankets. It was layers deep and it was like a mattress. This room was a constant drum circle. Everyone got high there daily. A friend of one puked in the corner. Both refused to claim responsibility, they just added more blankets. They had a few fights. One involved one peeing on the other side of the room where his stuff was, and the other retaliated. They added more blankets, spilled bong water, and added more blankets. They made a blankets, pizza box, and body fluid lasagna. By spring, the whole dorm was raunchy. The guys were used to it and just stayed there. Clean out was the worst because the rot smell was released. They had to use box cutters and take it out in chunks. Story 5. Long story. First semester in residence, dorms. It was the week before midterms, and I was sitting at my desk studying my law notes for my provincial statutes class when I hear someone start kicking my door, followed by laughter and the sound of someone running away. So I casually moved my notes next to the hallway door, made myself a coffee, and continued studying right next to the door. Why, you might ask? Because these little decopters had done it before, and they always went for the double tap. Sure as the Tin Man had a sheet metal dong, I hear someone running down the hallway laughing and hitting doors. Right when they got to my door, I ripped it open and grabbed the little bastard by the collar and threw him to the ground and stood over him screaming. "Do you think this is a joke? Huh? Why aren't you laughing, funny guy?" The guy in charge of my floor came running down the hall when he heard me yelling at this kid and pulled me back from him. The next day, that kid was kicked out of residence and fined over $1,000 for disturbing other students, as well as drinking underage and just being an asshat. I have so many stories from residence, but this one will always have a special place in my heart. Story 6. I went to Columbia University. I was in John Jay dorm my freshman year. It's 15 stories tall if I remember correctly. The important details are 1, it's on 114th Street, about 120 blocks or so north of Lower Manhattan, and 2. Back in the early 2000s, there was nothing preventing kids on the top floor from climbing out onto the roof, which is pretty crazy. 2000 seems kinda late for that. Anyway, 9/11 happens about a week into my freshman year. After watching the news for a while on the TV on my floor, I go up to the top floor where I had met a guy during orientation, and I used his room to climb out onto the roof. You could see the towers burning, even from so far uptown. I had a camera and I took a picture, and then moments after I took the picture, the first tower collapsed. I could hear people from all over the building screaming. Anyway, that's my dorm story. I climbed on the roof and watched the World Trade Center collapse. Oh, also, we busted in on a guy while he was banging his RA once. Story 7. Some guys on my floor decided to trap another guy in the bathroom. Our rooms were designed as suites where 2 rooms connect via bathroom and you lock the bathroom door from the bedroom. The guy who was trapped was claustrophobic and got out the only way he could think, by barreling through the walls and into the hallway. I wasn't there when it happened and only saw the aftermath of a huge hole in the wall, but that's pretty wild. Story 8. These 2 brother and sister ginger twins lived in my dorm, both pale, overweight, with straggly hair. Some of us were sitting on the sofas in the lobby, chatting away and planning where to hold our 420 session later that day. An ambulance pulls up. Emergency workers rush into the building with the gurney, headed straight for the elevators. Everyone is wondering what's going on and is clearly worried. 10 minutes later, the emergency crew comes out of the elevator. Ginger's sister is lying in the gurney yelling in pain, face red and covered in sweat. Ginger brother is by her side running along with the EMT team, also sweating, red-faced and clearly panicked. As they turn the corner and head towards the exit, we can now see the problem. Ginger boy managed to get his whole fist up his sister, but couldn't get it out. We never saw them again. Story 9. I was an RA and have a few crazy ones from that experience, but here's my best. You have to be on duty while an RA. Basically, walk around and check stuff out. Answer calls if stuff is going down. Well, I'm sitting around my first night in duty, kinda hoping something happens, when I see a naked kid walk past my door. Obviously, I start following him and ask what's going on. He stops on the stairs and Ace Ventura style with his butt tells me to F myself. He then proceeds to try and break into a number of rooms, at which point we call the cops. When they finally show up, he punches out my co-RA and flees. The cops corner him in a lounge and I got to watch him get tased. Acid. Be careful. Story 10. I had my share of crazy dorm mates, but my dad's story takes the cake. 1960s and my dad had 3 other roommates. One of them got a bottle of bourbon from his dad's cabinet and snuck it into the dorm. At that time, it was customary for RAs to do nightly rounds to all the rooms to make sure everyone was safe and sound inside their own room at 10 p.m. My dad and the 2 other roommates decided to pretend to be the RA and knock, while the 4th guy was showing off his prize to some other hallmates. He panicked. Not thinking, he threw the glass bottle under the bed, which had metal wire holding the mattress up. The bottle shattered, filling the entire room with the smell of alcohol. Everyone panicked. Luckily, it was right before Christmas break. My dad had the idea of getting a few Christmas trees to cover up the smell. A few minutes later, after they had shuffled the trees in, the RA shows up. He sees the tree and thinks that the 4 boys have come up with the best plan ever: competitive Christmas tree decoration contests. Of course, they all went along with it, and it became a campus-wide event and was continued for at least a few years, all because my dad wanted to prank his roommate. Story 11. I lived in a suite, which was 3 rooms with 2 guys in each room, then a shared living room. 2 of my suite mates, let's call them Mike and John, go out for a night of drinking. Mike and John bring home 2 girls and start hooking up with them in their rooms. Halfway through banging with these girls, the girls decide to switch guys. Mike and John don't stop it, so they switch and finish banging the other guy's girl. Yeah, that's a pretty crazy next day to hear about that. Story 12. Freshman year. I, along with some of my dorm mates, it was a big suite, got drunk at the room down the hall. One of them got too inebriated and had to be escorted or dragged back to our suite so he can go vomit. My other dorm mate and I led him to the toilet so he can do his business. While he's heaving, the girlfriend of one of the other dorm mates storms in and heads straight to the shower, sobbing. While she's crying, the boyfriend, who is also incredibly drunk, comes in. While he's leaning against the doorframe, he apologizes to his GF. Amanda, I'm sorry. This is all happening while the other dorm mate and I are in the bathroom because we were looking after the other guy who was barfing his guts out. The GF storms out of the shower. I don't want to hear it. I can't believe you. Amanda, I'm sorry, I didn't know. How could you not know? It's a totally different feeling. So, me and the other guy are confused at this point. Right away, the GF grabs a bottle of mouthwash and starts chugging and gargling. Then she starts brushing her teeth furiously. While this is happening, I ask with drunken confusion, what's going on? The GF turns to me with foam all over her mouth. What do you think? Have you not caught on? So I think about it for a bit. and realize with eyes wide open. I had to stop myself from laughing when she confirmed it. What happened was the boyfriend was so drunk that he peed in his girlfriend's mouth while she was blowing him. She had yellow spots all over her shirt. Story 13. I may be buried, but I finally have a relevant story. I was coming back from a drunken night my sophomore year. I decided to take a killer crap before going to bed and sleeping the idiocy of the night off. I figured that I'd treat myself and go to the handicapped stall because when you're drunk, space is wonderful. So I'm minding my own business and I hear the clacking of high heels on the tile floor. I hear two voices whispering frantically, "Crap, the big one's taken, let's go here." I look over and see a pair of heels and a pair of sneakers, and I hear a zipper undone. I think y'all can imagine what happened next. In between the moaning and sighing, I can't help but let out drunk farts and whatnot. To her credit, she never stopped. Anyway, I finish my business, wash my hands, and leave. I got into bed realizing that I had forgotten to brush my teeth. I grab my gear and go back in. As I turned the sink on, I saw the couple walk out of the stall together. I nodded and waved, and they went about their day. I saw that girl everywhere until I graduated. Story 14. First dorm roommate I lived with for 3 weeks. He never bathed the entire time. The stench was unbearable and I moved out. Found out after I moved out, people called him Chester the molester. Great. Second roommate was great. He's now a working actor, so props to him. He would always say, "Pardon me," even after the lightest of burps. I thought it was weird, but he's a nice guy. Kinda on the arty/nerdy side, but he had a lot of arty, nerdy friends who would come over a lot and hang out all the time. They were generally respectful and nice, so no worries. The most awkward and nerdy of all of them. Why reframe? Glasses, she'd push up her nose by scrunching her face, short bobbed hair, and flat as a board chest. She'd sit on my bed a lot, even with me laying in it trying to doze off. One night, she just laid down next to me. Okay, this is weird, I thought. She laid there until well after we turned the lights out and my roommate was lightly snoring. She then kissed me. Hell, a girl is in my bed kissing me. Who am I to stop this? So I kissed her back. It's the kind thing to do, right? She then, without any kind of reservation, took off her shirt and the sports bra she used as her everyday bra, and out came the most amazing breasts I had ever seen and have ever seen to this day. And I'm almost 37 now. She was stacked like a library. They were firm and she loved having them paid attention to. We didn't hook up that night, but I ended up dating her for a while and being her first because, hell, she may have been nerdy, but to this day, that body. My next door neighbor was an alcoholic. He'd get so drunk he'd crap all over the hallway in his dorm room and end up butt naked in the middle of the bathroom with crap covering him from head to toe. Other than that, a pretty normal dorm experience. Story 15. The Pea Puck. Lived in the freshman football dorm. The doors in my dorm were all directly across the hallway from each other. There were some dudes a couple of slots down the hall from me that liked to play music too loud and just generally be rude and disrespectful. Our RA was a big coward who was too passive to really do much about it. One night, their neighbor across the hall got tired of their crap. He took an empty pizza box, peed in it, and put it in the freezer. Then, late at night, when everyone was asleep, he took the frozen block of pea, hereafter known as the pea puck, out of the pizza box, set it on the floor of his room, and slid it across the hall into the a-hole's locked dorm room. My understanding is both of them refused to clean it up, each believing the other was responsible for the puddle in the middle of the room they woke up to. Relations between the two soured. Surprise, surprise. Dude across the hall was never suspected. Heard the story after finals. Still my favorite story from college. Story 16. I had a friend who lived on a sub-free hall in the same dorm building as me. Although he lived on this sub-free hall, he started drinking about 2 weeks into the school year. When he'd come home drunk, he'd be scared to run into his RA, so he'd sleep on the floor of my room. It got to the point where I had a bottle of water, a bucket of pretzels, and an air mattress, pillow, and blanket waiting there because this happened so frequently. One night, he came back a little more drunk than usual. I find him in my room when I come back from hanging out with people. He's laying on the floor on his back, snacking on pretzels and just being generally silly. Then I see his hand fall into his pants. It's there longer than it should be, and I just asked, "What are you doing?" He continued to play with himself, so I left the room for a couple minutes just to clear my head because I could not believe what was happening. I come back a few minutes later and just shout, "What the F are you doing?" Then he just gives me the creepiest, happiest, just finished smile I've ever seen, and then he fell asleep. When he woke up the next morning, I asked him if he remembered the previous night. He had no recollection whatsoever. I told him what I'd seen, and he buried his face in the pillow, and a few seconds later responded, "I need to go to church," and left. Story 17. Freshman year. Myself and a handful of other people were in this guy's room drinking. His RA knocks on the door. We shove the booze under some blankets. The RA is super stoned and asks if he should put on sunglasses before anyone else sees him. We told him to shower and change because he smelled like he had just been in a weed sauna. He says thanks, takes a Tupperware container out of his backpack and hands it to the guy who lived in the room. He said, sorry, they're just normal brownies, but I don't want to eat them all right now, so eat them for me. Then he walked back to his room. We continued to get drunk and eat brownies. Sophomore year, I lived with a girl who was legitimately crazy. The dumbest thing she did was tell our RA that I had booze in our room. I didn't. She did. She got written up, I got a talking to. The worst she did was bang while I was in the room. The craziest was when she turned off every light in the room, including my desk light, and left to shower. I didn't turn the lights back on. When she returned, she threw a tantrum about how all of the lights were off. Story 18. I guess it would have to be the unique way we used to sneak kegs in for parties. Starting in 1983, I lived on the 6th floor in Cary Hall in the Towers dorm complex at Central Michigan University. The room at the end of the floor, 611, had been a notorious party spot for a couple years running. So there was an effort, kind of, but it was there, to try and keep massive amounts of alcohol from finding its way into that room. My freshman year, someone discovered that if you stuck a coat hanger into the little hole on the elevator doors and wiggled it around a bit, you could open the doors whether or not the elevator was there. Dangerous? Sure. But where there are open elevator shafts, there are also opportunities. Turns out there was just enough room on top of the elevator for 2 people to sit, or 1 person and 1 keg. So instead of trying to smuggle in the beer up the stairs or in the elevator, we brought them in on top. Send the elevator to the ground floor, roll the keg the short distance from the sidewalk to the 1st floor elevator shaft, then send the elevator to the 5th floor, open the doors on floor 6, and roll the keg down the hall. It also helped that our RA didn't care. Story 19. The people on our dorm floor got to be pretty close over the year. Our RA was chill and always cut us slack and gave us multiple warnings instead of writing us up for drinking, music, or whatever. He also made one very important promise. On the last night in the dorms, he would break all the rules and play beer pong with us. Sounds innocent enough? A majority of the floor stayed through finals week until the very last night you were allowed to remain in the dorms in anticipation for the night. We hoarded our alcohol and made attempts to acquire a keg. What unfolded next was absolute anarchy. The kind of stuff you picture when you're an 18-year-old heading to college and just saw Animal House for the first time. Everyone went nuts. Our RA opened his room to a beer pong tourney and things quickly spiraled out of control. One dorm room became a rave-like dance party. We found some tents and tried to drunkenly set them up. When it failed, the poles were used for a drunken jousting tournament. Posters on the walls were converted into clothing, bottles of wines were sent down the elevator so the resident director could join the party. The RA on duty came by on patrol and was quickly bribed with copious amounts of beer. He stayed. My best friends, girls, made out after our RA kissed another male RA to encourage shenanigans. Our RA decided clothes were just too hard and stripped down to his boxer briefs. He was also given a fake mustache and sunglasses to disguise himself and his mistakes. As abandoned dorm room became the hookup room, people left from other floors sniffed out the party and joined. Hundreds of cans of beer, tens of bottles of liquor, and a few bags of wine all gone. The recycling room was full from people moving out, and it became the equivalent of a ball pit to toddlers for my drunken friends. Eventually, all passed out strewn throughout the floor in time for sunrise. In the morning, a very hungover RA had to check all of our rooms and sign us out. The struggle bus was full. My roommate and I were neighbors with an international student from Asia. The night was perfectly summed up when his mom, who for whatever reason spent the night in his dorm, came out in the morning and screamed in horror when she saw the hallway and passed out bodies, broken bottles, and torn down signs. That was the last night of my freshman year at college, and still one of the best nights of my life. Whenever someone tries to tell me that dorms aren't fun and you can't meet people, I smile to myself and remember the night we broke all the rules and turned an innocent game of beer pong with our resident advisor into anarchy. I've never posted on Reddit before, but this story just had to be shared. Story 20. My freshman year. First time I got "Why is this room spinning?" drunk. I woke up in the shower sometime around 6 a.m. I decided that after laying in my own vomit on the sinks, I should shower and had fallen asleep in them. I went back to my room and there was someone in my bed. I couldn't really tell who, but I thought it might have been one of my roommate's friends. I could at least remember the night, so I know I hadn't brought her back with me or anything. We had single rooms on our floor, and one of them was empty. The guy had left after only a couple of weeks, so I figured I would go and sleep in there. Apparently, someone else had that idea as well and had beaten me to it. So I went back to my room and just decided to crash on the floor. 10 minutes later or so, I hear something that sounds like running water. My roommate was half awake from me coming in and heard it too, and asked, "Yo, are you puking?" I replied no and looked up. It's some naked chick. The girl that had been in my bed was now completely naked, throwing up on my TV. My roommate got out of bed, grabbed her, dragged her across the hall, hit the down button on the elevators, waited for it to arrive, and threw her in. He threw some paper towels over the mess, and we both went back to sleep and cleaned it up later. A couple weeks later, we were relaying the story to another guy on our floor who lived in the other single. He had, the night of the incident, brought a girl back from a party with him. Afterward, he couldn't take her snoring, so he went and slept in the single room, the one I had tried to go to. When he went back to his room in the morning, all the girl's stuff, clothes, cells, small bag with her school ID and money, was there, but she wasn't. She never came back for it either. She must have had a room in the same place as mine on her floor and tried to go back to it while still hammered. I kinda want to know what happened to her after my roommate threw her in the elevator.